Thank you very much. I thank members for attending. Members will be coming in as they're able. We have a very busy schedule this week, and at the same time, it's super important that we appropriately address our law enforcement professionals across the country during Police Week in Congress. I'll touch on that in a minute. Let me just clarify that this is an informal roundtable. Participation is not required. It's encouraged across the board by members, and I appreciate the members that have taken their time to participate. What's most important and the purpose of today is for us to listen and for the nation to have the opportunity to see presented before Congress some candid discussion about where we stand as a nation in the relationship between local and state law enforcement and the federal government and federal law enforcement. We have an opportunity in this era to correct anything that's wrong and to improve those areas that are working well. So I look forward to a vigorous discussion, but this is not a hearing. We will recognize members freely, and there'll be no clock determining the length of our interaction. So I'm going to, with that brief opening statement, I'm going to introduce our panelists today. We have Colonel Robert T. Hodges. He runs the state law enforcement for the state of Louisiana. Colonel Hodges and I have had quite extensive interaction through the course of my law enforcement career and congressional service, and especially over the last year, we worked on a particular mission that I'm going to ask him to address today. We have Sergeant Ed Lenz. Sergeant Lenz ran the Butler County ESU. There's the tactical team that was on the ground at the local level on J-13 during the assassination attempt. He coordinated pre-mission with federal, local, and state law enforcement, and based upon my calm and thorough assessment of law enforcement operations that day, Sergeant Lenz and his men with Butler County ESU did excellent work on the ground, J-13. And he's going to have an opportunity to address that today, and members to ask questions. We have Sergeant Zalapone. He's a large fellow at the end of the table. Sergeant Zalapone is a SWAT operator for Butler County ESU and played a key role on J-13 in stopping Thomas Crooks from firing another round into the crowd or into our president. So I'm honored to have these people here today. I'm going to, each member will be recognized again according to their presence, and this is informal and there'll be no real clock. So let me just touch on recognizing myself where we are for Police Week. In 1962, President Kennedy signed a proclamation designating May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day. 20 years later, in 1982, a gathering of about 120 people met in Washington for the first memorial service on this day to honor fallen officers. That solemn occasion has grown into what we call now Police Week, an annual gathering of 35 or 40,000 people, police officers from across the country and their families, who gather in our nation's capital to remember the nearly 25,000 law enforcement professionals who have given their life in the line of duty. This subcommittee is meeting today, and of course, less formal, but I hope members will appreciate the spirit of this roundtable as a less rigid opportunity to talk with professional law enforcement men that represent state and local law enforcement and give us a look into the challenges that they face every day. I hope this will encourage a candid exchange of ideas. Our panelists are in town for Police Week, so we're grateful that they took the time. away from there's a lot to see in this city. There's a lot to do on Police Week. They've taken the time to talk with us about the challenges they face every day and how we can support them. As a former military police officer and a SWAT operator myself for many years in civilian law enforcement, I've been in these men's shoes. But law enforcement, like all industries, evolves and changes, and so do criminals and criminal operations. And we have to keep ourselves informed. So I look forward to hearing from our panelists today on the latest challenges they face in the 21st century law enforcement. My distinguished ranking member is not with us today. Let me, on a note of sort of committee observation here, there was some objection by our colleagues across the aisle that they were not quote unquote allowed to have a panelist today. But this is a roundtable discussion. We didn't have to have any notification with for the minority party of our committee. They were invited to attend. They choosing not to attend, that's up to them. But for our side of the aisle, we respect you men, and we're going to extend that respect today, and we'll look forward to speaking to you. So let me introduce our panelists. Colonel Hodges, who I've noted is a highly decorated 30-year veteran of Louisiana State Police. He's risen to the top slot with Louisiana State Police and currently serves as superintendent. Colonel Hodges has an agency of 2,700 people. Sergeant Edward Lenz is a patrol sergeant for the Adams Township Police Department in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and the commander of the Butler County Emergency Service Unit, Butler County ESU. Sergeant Aaron Zalapone is a patrol sergeant for the Adams Township Police Department in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and a member of the Butler County Emergency Services Unit, a SWAT operator. I thank you all for being here, and let me introduce, we have opening statements from our panelists, correct? Correct? Okay, I'm told that opening statements are going to move straight into questions. So I'm going to recognize Ms. Boebert for questions, and we appreciate her early arrival.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I certainly do appreciate this roundtable, and thank you so much for being here, especially during Police Week, where certainly we honor those who have served and have fallen, but we're also here to listen from those of y'all who are still serving and with us. So I have a couple of questions when it comes to policy. I would love to tie Louisiana, your experiences with Colorado. We have a lot of sanctuary policies that really restrict our law enforcement officers from doing their job and from keeping their communities safe. We have policies that prevent City of Denver employees from having any communication with federal ICE agents, and then at a state level, there is no coordination allowed between local and state law enforcement officers with ICE, and that has prevented us from really keeping our communities safe. Now, in Louisiana, with policies like this, how would that impact your position, Colonel?
So, good afternoon, Congresswoman, members, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here and represent Louisiana State Police and Governor Jeff Landry. So, in Louisiana, we have a state police. As you know, in Colorado, it's a state patrol as well as a Bureau of Investigation. So it makes our efforts and our support of federal entities somewhat easier, really more efficient and effective, because all of the both investigations and the patrol functions work seamlessly. Relationships with our federal partners are very solid in Louisiana. Fortunately, when Governor Landry came in January of 2024, he prioritized law enforcement partnerships we had to first make sure that our state agencies were getting along or enhancing those partnerships, and then to work with our federal as well as our local, so our sheriffs and police chiefs, like my colleague sitting next to me. So when that event happened on the 1st of January, the relationship was there. We knew one another's limitations, capabilities, egos were put aside, and we were the thing that was priority. And to your point, it's a public safety mission. It's not a Republican or Democrat mission. It's public safety in Louisiana, our residents and visitors, and in the United States of everyone who's here. And
That might be me, sorry.
yes, ma'am. And so working with the federal agencies and being a force multiplier in their mission, they do the same for us in our local missions. And so we don't have those challenges in Louisiana. Fortunately, I'd like to think that even though it was a tragedy, just like in Pennsylvania, the tragedy we had in New Orleans on January the 1st has made us a better law enforcement partner and a blueprint across the country of how local, state, and federal law enforcement not only work together, but we trust one another. No one has an ego. No one's worried about who's getting credit for success in public safety. It takes all of us, and it takes folks like yourself on this committee who fund us, who provide training, who provide federal resources, equipment, and things that local agencies are trained in but don't have authorization to maybe deploy or to utilize to its fullest potential.
Yes, thank you, Colonel. And just a couple more questions on policy, and then I kind of want to turn it over to hear some of your perspectives from Butler, Pennsylvania. But when it comes to funding of our police, we've heard cries from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and members of their party wanting to defund police. We've seen crime increase. The city of Denver in Colorado had a massive cut to the funding of their local police to subsidize housing and food and medical for illegal aliens, not veterans or seniors or anything like that, just for the folks who are being brought into Denver illegally and to house them. In Colorado, we've seen qualified immunity stripped from our police officers, and I think Governor Landry is a great example of good leadership, especially from what I'm hearing from you in your position with your fellow colleagues, your fellow officers. And we've even seen at a federal level, when Speaker Pelosi was in power, she wanted to remove qualified immunity at a federal level. So it's not just the state of Colorado or other states that are voting on this, but she wanted to completely remove that qualified immunity, putting our officers at risk and making them liable, and really hindering, I believe, folks from going after bad guys because they don't want to be held liable for an honest mistake. And so with these policies, do you see safety increasing in states like Louisiana and crime decreasing? And what is the strategy to get to the communities even more safe and prevent bad policies that go against our law enforcement officers?
So first off, qualified immunity is a must for law enforcement. We can't confidently and effectively do our jobs. We put the public at risk when we don't have that qualified immunity because we hesitate or we pause to act. And when we do that, people get hurt. And the people we're trying to protect, which are everyone in our respective states or across the country that are there, whether they're a visitor or they're a resident of the state. And those policies, when you think because of a few bad actors that you want to paint the broad brush of law enforcement as having challenges with overreach of their authority is just a false narrative. And I think we've all learned that not funding our law enforcement officers across Louisiana and across the country was a failed experiment. We have to have not only the trust of the community, but the support and funding from a federal level and a state level to be effective. And if we're looking over our shoulder, worried about laws that are put in place by local officials or state officials, then we can't perform our jobs. And as you saw, many of you all saw a decline in the law enforcement ranks from 2020 to 2024. But I believe public safety is now on the rise, and men and women are coming back to the ranks of law enforcement. And that's a great thing for the United States of America, because we want our family members, our spouses, our children, our mothers and fathers, and everyone to be able to traverse throughout their states, their communities, without the fear of violent criminals and violent crimes. And if law enforcement doesn't have qualified immunity, then they're going to be unable to act properly, efficiently, and effectively, because they're more worried about retaining an attorney for counsel because someone said their rights were infringed upon, when in fact they were performing their job in the scope and the training and everything that's legally and constitutionally within the guidelines. However, someone decided to put some overreach in place, and I don't think that benefits everyone in the country. So we've been fortunate under Governor Landry's leadership that in our legislature has been supportive and made public safety their #1 priority. And so we've noticed a shift. And when I say a shift, it's more support, but it doesn't come without community trust. Every day we have to build the trust of the community. That way, when crimes happen, victims and witnesses come forward. They want to talk to troopers, deputies, police officers, or federal agents in their neighborhoods, and oftentimes they will tell us things before they happen, and that's the best because we can prevent a crime. But the policies and the defunding movement, I think, clearly has shown everyone, and I know you all know better than anyone here in Washington, D.C. at our Capitol, that those policies did not produce a loving, productive, and more importantly, a society that we can be proud of. So we're thankful to have the leadership that's in place right now, which includes all of you all in this room, and more importantly, that hopefully other members of Congress will understand that the most important thing is public safety for everyone, and not protecting the criminal, but protecting the rights of the victims. And we need to hold those who commit violent crimes accountable, and that cannot be done without qualified immunity for all of law enforcement.
Thank you very much, Colonel. And I do want to be respectful of my colleagues' times here as well. But, you know, when you say that officers hesitate or think before they actually act because of those qualified immunity policies being removed, that's huge, because you are the men and the women who run into danger to protect us. We have children here in the room, and you know, you're fighting for each and every one of them to ensure their safety. There was even a report on our local CBS News in Colorado that in 2023, a 15-year-old was driving more than double the speed limit, over 90 in a 45, and struck a woman who was walking. And he was here illegally. His car wasn't insured. The mother didn't give him permission to drive the car. She was illegal. She wasn't responsible. And you know, this young man got 100 hours probation for taking a life. And you know, and so there are a lot of policies that are encouraging that and protecting, as you said, the criminal rather than the victim. And I do have Butler, Pennsylvania questions, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and I'm sure that I'm going to hear from that because this is so important. You were there on a historic day, and I just want to thank you all so much for your service.
We'll make sure that's touched on. Thank the gentlelady. General Perry, recognized for questioning, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, gentlemen. I'm going to ask something. I was an enlisted guy first in the Army, so I'm going to the sergeants here a little bit. As a general theme, I wonder if, you know, from your vantage point, if you look at people that want to join law enforcement, and I think I was never in law enforcement, but I think it's a calling, right? You don't accept a job, or you don't seek a job that has generally low pay, bad hours, a lot of bad conditions, unless you're called to it. And I think of your job that way. But the one thing that I grew up with, that I think most Americans believe in, is a respect for law enforcement. And there's a pride that comes in serving your community where you live and keeping people safe and being there to help. And I think that law enforcement officers exemplify that. But I think over time, the willingness to do that by people has become diminished. And I wonder if you would comment on it, because I think it's partly due to leaders in our country at all levels essentially telegraphing or indicating that it's okay to be disrespectful to law enforcement. It's okay to attack law enforcement. It's that the things that were unheard of in the past are now acceptable. And so if you're thinking about what career choice you want to make as a young person, and you see that one of the major things that about being a law enforcement officer is having the respect of your community by virtue of that position and your willingness to sacrifice is now gone, you're going to make other choices. And I would just like you to comment on recruiting, what your thoughts are. Do leaders not in law enforcement, people like me, do we have an impact on what happens to you?
I would say absolutely. The different stories get covered by the media, different policies that get put in place, laws get passed, that has a tremendous impact on our recruitment, and I would say also our job retention. There are lots of people that get into law enforcement that simply have left. Very good police officers that leave to do other things. And part of that probably, we talk about qualified immunity. If you are fearful that you're going to lawfully use force, yet might still lose your career, lose your house, lose your family, that's not a risk most of us would be willing to take. Unfortunately, police officers do make mistakes. We're all human. And there's, a process that's in place for that. But I think eliminating qualified immunity across the board definitely has an impact on how we recruit police officers, how we retain police officers. In Pennsylvania, in the area we're from, police departments are paying more than they ever have. They are offering signing bonuses, retention bonuses, and departments where you used to have 200 applicants, we're still only having 10 people apply for a job. And how do we fix that? I don't have the answer for all of that, but I do think respect is a huge, huge part of that. That is correct. But respect is huge. We should respect your offices. We should respect the office of the president, whoever is there. And it seems throughout society, a lot of that respect is sort of eroded, which does make our job more difficult, no different than it makes your job much more difficult.
Yeah, I think that we just generally as a society have a common respect for one another. It doesn't mean that we agree on everything and we have the same life experiences, but we respect each other, generally speaking. But it seems to me over the course of the last 10 years of my life, or maybe a little longer, a little less, there has been a decided disrespect accorded to people that were law enforcement officers that wear the uniform. And I think, and I don't know, so that's why I'm asking you folks. You're on the ground. That I think it does affect. You said, you used to have 200 applicants, and now you have 10. I think that is really corrosive to our community. And I think that, look, it's cultural. Representative Higgins and Boebert and Biggs and I can write whatever legislation we want to, but you can't force people to think a certain way. They're going to believe what they believe. But I do think that people in positions of leadership, whether you're a township supervisor or the President of the United States or one of us members of Congress here, if you're out saying to the world, it's, we're going to hold, you're making life and death decisions in a split moment, right? In a moment. We had an officer in Pennsylvania, Officer Duarte, in the district I represented. He ran to the sound of the guns. Some guy hostile in a hospital with a firearm shooting the place up, and he ran in, and he didn't come home from that. If you're going to sign up for that kind of thing, Clay and I both served in the military. It's one thing when you're downrange, focused on the enemy, and bad things can happen, but you get to come home from that, and that's not your environment anymore. Police officers wake up every day, whether it's whatever shift you're on, I suspect, and you're in the combat zone, right? Whether you're doing warrant service or traffic or whatever other things you guys do, you don't know which moment. Like Officer Duarte, he was doing his thing. He gets a call, problem disturbance at the hospital, runs in, shots fired. Next thing you know, he's taking a round or two, and you know, he's not. You don't know that, and so it's really important, I think, for leaders to show the respect that is due for people that are willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of their own communities, and that's a really sacred, solemn pride that people that wear the uniform have, and that communities can have because they have people willing to do it, and we have eroded that in our society because we have countenanced and allowed the kind of rhetoric that has come from leaders, and I think there's that there's an effect. I do, and I'm just, but I might be wrong, so I'm looking for validation from you. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Biggs, please address our panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. Appreciate our panel. I guess technically we're calling you a panel and not a bunch of witnesses, so we're not allowed to do that. So we're grateful to have you here. It looks like some of you might have brought some family and supporters with you, and I know that we thank you for your service. We thank your families too. I mean, that's really where it continues beyond your service. And as we were sitting here, and I was thinking of disrespect, and the leaders really have an impact on that. When Clay and I first came in, we're ahead of Lauren, but we came in after Scott. But you remember they do the art contest, right? Do you remember the art?
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah, and somebody had depicted a police officer as a pig. And some congressional office said that's a winner, and they brought it down here. And so thank goodness for Duncan Hunter Jr., because Duncan used to take that painting and off the wall and to go hide it. And then the Capitol Police would go after him, saying, "Hey, he was the troublemaker." Yeah, so we need to get that picture back. And so that was outrageous. But and then the recent thing that you've seen at the ICE facility. Those
If the gentleman allow me to
I yield,
clarify
yeah.
for our panelists,
yeah.
You'd have been fascinated by this. I was new to Congress. There's great art contests from every district in the country, and the congressional rep gets to choose from high school artists, and then it's set up like alphabetically on the tunnel on the wall that connects the Capitol with the office complexes. You walk through it, and so we get to highlight art. And for a young artist, it's a big deal to have your art hung in the Capitol. Well, one congressman chooses this art that was very, very ugly depiction of police officers. It literally is like half human, half pig. Right. And we were stunned by that. And I was new to Congress, was going through some method of objection through Speaker Ryan, and where one Duncan Hunter is a Marine, is a former Marine, a representative, and he had enough of that for about a week, and he just went and ripped it off the wall and hid it somewhere. Yeah. So that's what Congressman Big is referencing. You'd have all enjoyed with fascination that whole thing unfolded.
Then they came after Duncan.
Yeah,
They came after Duncan. They wanted to like charge him and stuff.
The right is wrong and the wrong is right. You know what I'm saying?
I yield. I didn't mean.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get too far down that, but I mean, now you get a better picture of what happened there. But the point is that leaders really do set the tone in some ways as to how you're treated. So, but I'm going to ask each one of you this, and there you go. And a very open question for each one of you. Not too long ago, so you have these ICE detainers, right? Somebody's in the country illegally, they've committed a crime, there's a detainer for them. And there's a distinction, you let, ICE wants to get them inside the facility. Why? Because it's safer for the inmate, it's safer for the police, and safer for ICE, it's safer for everybody. But recently, you had an incident in Denver where they refused to allow the transfer to take place in the facility, so they released the person outside in the parking lot and basically say, "You get them, ICE, right here." And so it turns out that the guy gets away, ICE gets injured in the process. And so my question for each of you is, when you follow the proper procedures, I really believe then everybody would have been safer and you have control. So I'm going to start with Sergeant Zalaponi, who's been very quiet today. And then I'm asking an open question, kind of discuss that and how facilitating working with feds works in your agencies and how we can pull that together. Sergeant Zalaponi.
Thank you, Congressman. I think for us, that's one of the problems that we don't understand how the federal government operates. So actually, it'd probably be better to learn some of those TTPs and everything that the feds use with those kind of things. So, but honestly, Congressman,
Then that sounds like there needs to be some more open, transparent communication between agencies, local and state agencies, and the feds.
yes, Congressman.
Sergeant Lins.
We recently had a traffic stop that was made, traffic violation. But during that encounter, we came to find that the driver was in the country illegally. And the first time, probably in 8 years that I can remember, ICE followed up with us and actually responded, I believe, to his place of employment to pick him up on that detainer. So there is some communication that does seem to make it through to the right people. But sometimes for the boots on the ground, it's difficult to know where we're supposed to call, who we're supposed to reach out to, unless you've done it. And sometimes we kind of work through it and learn the process as we go. But, some sort of training, publication, open line of communication where we can figure out, hey, this is who we do want to detain, this is who we don't want to detain. Here's somebody you can quickly call, easily call to figure that out. I think as the federal government is concerned, providing that training to us, whether it be regarding immigration laws, whether it be regarding, different radio communications, tactical scouting, planning, counter-sniper stuff, that is an opportunity the federal government has really to have a dramatic impact on our operations, just to make sure we are all on the same page. And then I should know what they're doing. They can ask questions of me. Hopefully they know what I'm doing. Really, the goal should be public safety. And I think if we all get on the same page, whether it be through training or something, better for everybody involved, especially the public we serve.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the 287G program and that's important because they do provide some training, and it's very interesting. Now, Colonel Hodges, the good news for me is that having come in with Clay, I now can understand your language. So I appreciate you being here and ask you if you'd expand on that as well.
So I'll just quickly say that obviously Louisiana State Police, along with our State Fire Marshal, has signed a compact with the 287G in Louisiana to support ICE in Homeland Security investigations regarding the immigration challenges that Louisiana and other states face. But I just want to go back to your earlier statement about law enforcement working collectively together, and Sergeant Lenz touched on it. It's the messaging and communication is so important, and you have to, for that federal agency, or for that local sheriff or that police chief, whoever was running that jail facility, or if it was Department of Corrections for the state, to release someone and put them outside of a controlled environment that's safe for everyone only puts the public at risk. So let's just talk about the public. Now we have someone that knows federal immigration is coming for them, and they're going to travel, leave, flee, and probably commit more illegal acts to remain in the country illegally. That puts communities at risk. It takes more law enforcement officers to track that person. More importantly, someone's going to get hurt in that process, unfortunately. And had they just coordinated the local jail facility, whoever was running that, whether it was the sheriff or police agency or state corrections, to ensure that federal law enforcement we're going to release them. And my experience has been when we've had detainers on on federal inmates going from federal penitentiary to a state correction facility, or even we have parishes in Louisiana, a county or a local sheriff. We're in coordination, so that way it's a smooth transfer, but more importantly, it keeps everyone safe. And to your point, no law enforcement officers are less likely to get injured and others injured as well when you do that safe transfer inside a facility that's specifically set up to house those who are under detention or arrest. The communication piece is so important, and they talked about training and talked about the things that local agencies can provide. Why would you conduct an operation without having your local partners involved? Who better knows the city or the county than local sheriffs and police officers? We would not, in Louisiana, ICE and Homeland Security investigations would not conduct any type of significant operation without the assistance of the local police, not because they have to, because it's best for the community. It keeps law enforcement safe, it keeps the community safe, and more importantly, we're effective in doing our job. And regardless of which side you're on, laws are in place and you gotta uphold them. You talked about, or rather the general talked about, how, and Sergeant Lenz mentioned it, you have to respect authority and the position regardless of who's in it. And it takes mothers and fathers and guardians to tell their children and to encourage their children to respect authority and law enforcement so we can have a society of laws and we can enjoy life to the fullest, whether you're as you see the kids behind me, whether you're on vacation here in D.C., you're going to dinner in the evening, you're going to house of worship on the weekend, you need to be safe. And you cannot be safe without law enforcement working together at every level across the country.
I appreciate that. Appreciate all your answers. And because this is kind of a roundtable, I'll just say that one of our big issues in Arizona is we have a corridor that is kind of the highest in drug and human and sex trafficking. It just is. You've got this massive open border. We sit there. There's places where there's nothing there, and it's very rough to get folks in. And so it has to be local and federal working together. So thank you for being here. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields. I'm gonna recognize myself for a few minutes to talk with you gentlemen. Regarding detainers, please just clarify for America, and keep in mind that this is a roundtable discussion. It's rather informal as compared to a hearing. But what we're doing is part of the historical record. It's being live streamed, and every word you're saying been documented for our country, so people have opportunity to hear your message, even if they're not in the room. Regarding detainers, please clarify for America that if you have a man in custody in jail, like Sergeant Zalapone, if you have a warrant on your shift for someone that's in jail one county over from Butler, and you know he's incarcerated there, then that detainer is placed with that jail. And won't they notify your department when they're ready to release that guy so you can go pick him up?
Yes, Congressman.
That happens all the time, am I right?
It should.
Across the country. Sergeant Lenz?
Yes.
Colonel?
Yes, sir, at all levels.
Okay, at all levels. What we want to clarify for America is that detainers work very well across the country, in every county, in every state, for every department. The exception here that's being described, but as part of the national narrative right now, is recognizing a detainer for ICE. It's where you have some communities, some municipalities, some counties, some cities, they are not honoring detainers for ICE. It means ICE has a warrant for this guy, but they're not arranging for a safe transition of the incarceration of that human being from wherever he is currently incarcerated into ICE's custody. They're doing it for the county next door and the city down in another part of the state, but they're not doing it for ICE. And this does present a danger to the entire community. So You gentlemen, do you see in the course of your profession, you've been behind a badge for many years, cumulatively, I don't know how much, probably 50, 60 years easily of service here. Wouldn't it be unsafe for the community, for any jurisdictional authority to not recognize the existing warrant of someone to have in custody, Colonel? Wouldn't that be a danger to the community?
Yes, sir. It's a danger to everyone in the community. When someone is fleeing from a jail, a prison, whether it's a state or federal facility, they're fleeing because they know there's an outstanding warrant.
Bad things
or
can happen.
detainer. Yeah, and they will do whatever it takes not to go back to that facility. And they don't, it doesn't matter, man, woman, black, white, it does not matter. They just want to remain free and unincarcerated, even though they have to be held accountable for crimes they've committed.
Yes, sir. Sergeant Lynn, should we be honoring detainers and active warrants or not?
Yes, if we already have somebody in custody, generally speaking, it is safe for us to transfer them to somebody else's custody.
So if they contact you, you have them in your county jail, and in the next county over, or a county across the state has a warrant for that person, will you hold them for a reasonable amount of time?
Absolutely.
And Sergeant Zalapone, do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's unanimous. Regarding drone actions, Colonel Hodges, will you describe for my colleagues and for the Americans watching what has happened with our effort in Louisiana to purchase and be certified on and deploy drone mitigation, criminal drone mitigation technology that allows law enforcement using the standards of probable cause to mitigate, to track, to identify and track a criminal drone. And if it's identified as a threat, within the parameters of training and probable cause, and to take control of that drone and force it to land. So the controlling of that drone and forcing it to land is in my considered opinion, a law enforcement action. And yet, states are being stifled from using that technology as a law enforcement action based upon a wrong interpretation of existing laws. Essentially, Colonel, will you briefly summarize that, please, so my colleagues will know where we are?
So, as many of you all know, New Orleans, Louisiana hosted a Super Bowl, followed by a Mardi Gras earlier this year. Both events were Tier 1 rated, which allowed for the TFR, a temporary flight restriction, in and around those areas, both the NFL experience for the Super Bowl as well as the Caesars Superdome and other areas where NFL events were taking place. And then it extended through Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Although the capability and the training, our troopers have that, we do not have authorization to mitigate a drone, which is to take down a drone that puts the public at risk, as the chairman pointed out, with probable cause. And obviously, within the laws to do so, we have to have the assistance of the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, the FBI, or Department of Homeland Security, the way it stands right now. So although as a state police agency, we have the same training, the same capability, the same equipment, and we work with them, they presently, only federal law enforcement has the authorization to mitigate a drone, and that happened throughout the Super Bowl and through Mardi Gras for public safety purposes. Everyone knows on January 1st, we had a terrorist attack in New Orleans, and it was a heightened level of security. We had DHS Secretary Kristi Noem visit, as well as our U.S. Attorney Pam Bondi visit the city that week of Super Bowl and understood those concerns. And we hope that you all, as Congress, can provide authorization to states, and specifically include Louisiana. Certainly, we want to have the training, which we have, and there should be requirements and things in place, but we have to have that today. The drone is such an important tool, and Congressman Higgins has been an incredible supporter of this project, and more importantly, this initiative. As law enforcement expands and technology moves forward, we realize that drones won't replace our aircraft, our helicopters and planes, but they are a quick deployable law enforcement resource. And long-range drones require a waiver to use a military signal, which Congressman Higgins was able to help us with. But specifically to the mitigation, presently, the way the interpretation of the law by those here in Washington is that states do not have the authority to mitigate a drone, even though Louisiana has argued differently.
So if I could interject, gentlemen, and Ms. Bober, think about that. What they're saying is that, I believe is a wrongful interpretation of existing law. They're saying that that law enforcement, state law enforcement, Louisiana State Police, has a technology, existing technology, commercially available, that can track a criminal drone, and if law enforcement have line of sight on that criminal drone, and they have the technology to take control of that drone, but the existing interpretation of the law says that they don't have the authority to do that. They have to have special permission. And we ask them why. They say, well, it's a violation of the law interfering with a radio signal. We say, wait, it's a violation of the law to shoot someone. But the police officers with probable cause have the right to use lethal force. It's a violation of the law to crash your car into someone's car. Well, police officers have been using a pit maneuver to move, criminal cars that are running, been using pit maneuver for decades. So those actions are not violations of existing law. They are law enforcement actions. So when you pit a car, that's not a car crash. It's not investigated by Louisiana State Police with a Louisiana Uniform Motor Vehicle Crash Report. It becomes part of the narrative of the criminal investigation that you crashed that car. That's where you take down the details of the car that you pitted, serial number, et cetera, where you pitted it, all of that. It's not a crash that you're investigating. It's a law enforcement action. So what we're running into across the country, and Louisiana is like the pilot state, we're pushing this thing, is that I think state law enforcement should be able to buy commercially available technology and use it to protect the citizenry of their state. And so I ask
Have
for your
qualified immunity.
input on that.
And they should have qualified immunity so it doesn't go back on them when they are interjecting a credible threat.
Good point.
And, even some sort of limited federalization for local law enforcement officers to help with apprehension and even deportations to carry out these orders to prevent lawsuits from taking place from our officers. I think that there should be something there as well, and that goes hand in hand with that coordination with ICE.
So focus on drones.
Yeah, well, the gentleman yield for just a second.
Yes, yield.
When you talk about the federal laws that are being misinterpreted, are you referring to FAA laws or what?
Yes, sir, FAA.
okay.
So under the
So-
Biden administration, they sort of seized control and stopped this action, and they forced interpretations of the law, given the authority as if we were violating FAA law.
There are some ways to skirt that, I mean, that we could invoke. I mean, so we have a 287G program. So that means that the local law enforcement gets trained, and then they're effectively deputized to enact and enforce INA. So you actually could do something similar to that if you wanted to.
So
get on the-
as a course of conversation there, is that we have been presented with those options, but I hesitate to embrace pushing those options because I believe it's a 10th Amendment right of the state that is not, so in the existing law does authorize the Secret Service and DHS and the Coast Guard to use this particular technology both defensively to track and offensively to seize control of criminal drones. But nowhere in any of those laws does it prohibit the sovereign state from having that same authority. So I would argue that the 10th Amendment automatically empowers the sovereign state's law enforcement infrastructure to use existing commercially available technologies to deploy in the field and protect the citizenry. I yield.
Yeah, you may be right. I'm not going to say that you're wrong. I'm just going to suggest that ultimately the reason that states need to get deputized under the INA is because there is the Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to say if the federal government has occupied the field, which they have ostensibly, even though they didn't do it so well over the last 4 years, of immigration, then that means that the states could not actually enforce the federal law without some other authority granted. So that's why 287G is.
So how would the state respond to, how would a state law enforcement officer or a county law enforcement officer respond to an identified threat legally? If that criminal threat is a drone, what I'm telling you is right now, they have the technology to identify a criminal drone, and it's incoming into something that's not federally protected, like a festival or something. And that officer identifies that drone,
Yeah.
but doesn't have the authority to seize it.
So I'm going to just suggest that you're on the right path. I think we need to do something, because I'm thinking of Langley, and we had all the drones around there.
Oh, yeah.
And even our military was like, we don't know what we can do. Can we shoot them down? Can we track them? Can we take command and control? Which they could do all of those things. But they said, we are uncertain as to what we can do.
Yeah, we need to clarify.
It needs to be clarified, and that
And
comes to this
and-
body.
And Colonel Hodges can help. Shifting to J13 when I return, but I'm going to recognize Representative.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And first and foremost, Superintendent, just want to note, my dad went to Notre Dame, and my district overwhelmingly supports the University of Georgia. So I think we're all very grateful for the swift response and the work that so many of you did, cross-agency, of course, but to enable everybody to enjoy the Sugar Bowl the day after. A question that I have really across the board, I've got 15 counties in my district, so 15 sheriffs, and within each county, probably 2 to 3 jurisdictions. And what I hear from many of my sheriffs across the board is, particularly at least in my part of Georgia, is there's a real concern about criminals they apprehend, many of whom are mentally ill. They want to push those folks into mental ill facilities, but it's overcrowded, challenging in a lot of different aspects to get them in there. Would love to hear if that's the same thing you're experiencing across your states, Pennsylvania and Louisiana, respectively, and we'll start with you, Colonel.
Yes, sir. So obviously, mental health is a serious problem across the country. It's no stranger to Louisiana, especially to our municipalities like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Alexandria, and Shreveport. Those are our 4 largest cities, populated metropolitanly. And we obviously work very closely with our local law enforcement, and we have parishes instead of counties, but the same. And we have state resources, but we rely significantly on those local resources because we want those individuals to be able to remain in that area. So if they get some type of inpatient help or outpatient help, they can remain in their communities with family members who love them and care for them. And even if they need professional help, where they do an inpatient, you need family members to help facilitate visits and getting them to other things, and upon release to have them in an area that they know about. But there is a, I don't want to branch off into the homeless, but they kind of mirror each other, with many of those have that mental illness problem. And there's a lot of resources available. And we had that experience during our, Governor Landry put together a facility with the help of the federal government, a temporary facility for our homeless. And it didn't just provide food and meals, it provided counseling, mental health, professional counseling, as well as job training. And those things were incredibly important to really try to resolve that problem in the community. But beyond that, it's a concerted effort at all levels. It's not just the state's responsibility or the municipality or the parish or county. It's really everyone's responsibility. And as we have a lot of veterans who served our country honorably, we need to take care of them and ensure that we utilize the federal resources that are available at the respective veterans hospitals and things that are there. We have a lot of training, a lot of de-escalation training we do, duty to intervene, active bystander, implicit bias, many things that we do to train our troopers both those who have been on the job for many years and all of our new incoming troopers to ensure that they find that extra level of confidence when they're dealing with someone so they can understand the difference between someone who has a mental challenge as opposed to someone who's a violent criminal. And sometimes they overlap in what their actions dictate, and that's how we respond based on, you know, someone's actions and obviously if they're trying to harm someone else or themselves. But getting them to the necessary facility and ensuring that they're cared for is a top priority, I think, for everybody across the country.
Thank you, Colonel. And you want to speak both to Butler, but please go ahead, Sergeant.
Yeah, I would say majority of those, you know, unfortunately, that end up being arrested by us have some sort of underlying mental health problem. We frequently run into issues, whether it's an involuntary mental health commitment or, you know, we transport to the hospital for mental health treatment, that they sit in an emergency department sometimes for a week while they conduct a bed search and try to actually place them for mental health treatment. I feel like if I had to sit in an ER for 7 days waiting for a bed at a mental health facility, I too would probably need some mental health treatment. Again, how do we fix that? I think a lot of that comes down to some sort of funding. It seems like the mental health system as a whole really is overwhelmed. And if we could get those mental health facilities, you know, better funded, have more practitioners, maybe address some of those problems, and start to reduce that recidivism rate where we continually deal with the same person, they end up in jail, where maybe that's not the best place for them. If it's a crime and they're a criminal, we have to address the crime and their criminal actions. But if we can prevent that, that starts to lessen the burden on our end and hopefully lessen the burden on the mental health facilities. We're somewhat lucky both as a team as Butler ESU and as a police department. We work with a psychologist from the Allegheny Health Network Sentinel program, but she's funded by a grant. You know, so she's able to come in and do some training for us, both on our own mental health resiliency, but also on how to deal with and treat people who are in a mental health crisis, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're making good choices as we try to steer them. Or, hey, we're going to go the crime path, or we're going to go the mental health treatment path. But I think a lot of that I hear, there's not a whole lot of money and there's not a whole lot of funding in mental health. So health networks as a whole, hospitals as a whole, really don't want to invest in that because there's just no return in it.
Thank you, Sergeant. Anything else, Sergeant?
No, I couldn't have said any better than that. Good. Perfect.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chairman, and really directed to you, Colonel, but likewise would appreciate thoughts across the board. You know, this is National Police Week, and it's an incredible honor to have this roundtable, have this conversation, this dialogue. Everything we're passing on the floor this week connects to the issue set we all care about, but it's obvious that there are those on the other side of the aisle in this Congress who condemn and repeatedly vilify our brave men and women of law enforcement. I'm just curious the impact that has had on recruitment into the line of duty. And Colonel, I think you, given your stature and your role, would probably be able best to answer just how recruitment has either increased or decreased over the last few years, particularly as the rhetoric has escalated in opposition to our brave men and women of law enforcement.
So we talked on that a little earlier, but I'll revisit it. So it's no secret from 2020 to 2024 was very difficult with the public safety mission at all levels, local, state, and federal. And because of the I guess the consensus, the civil unrest, the COVID, you saw the public and the communities not, you know, trusting law enforcement. And so it was very difficult for us to successfully do our job. But I think you've seen a shift, at least in the last 16 months since Governor Landry appointed me in January of 2024. I truly see men and women coming back to public service, more specifically law enforcement service. So I think public safety is on the rise. I think with the current trend in the country, they realize that defunding the police and that these attempts to take away qualified immunity from law enforcement were failed experiments because crime rose in many cities across the country. and people did not feel safe. So I would hope that those who, your colleagues with you in Congress, realize that public safety is a must for everyone in every city, every county or parish, and every state or territory across the country, that law enforcement is a respected profession. We will earn your trust every day in your community, but it takes parents engaging their children and guardians, reminding them to respect law enforcement regardless of man, woman, or their race. It's no bearing. They wear the uniform. We need to respect that authority, and that needs to be continually exercised by the parents so the children can learn that, and they too will respect their teachers at school. And when they have a law enforcement, they have a crash, just a simple traffic crash or a speeding ticket, that they're not quickly trying to go to their phone and seeing that an app to fix that problem. The communication, just to please and thank you and yes ma'am, no ma'am, those things go a long way. But to your question, we had significant challenges in Louisiana State Police. We had 862 troopers in January of '24. We're up over 1,007 right now, and we see continually increases. Although, like the Sergeant Lentz said, the numbers are not nearly what they used to be, where you had 2,000 and 3,000 applicants. Now you only have 200 or 300. We hope that in the coming years that more people will come back to public service, but they have to feel confident in government that if we make a mistake, that it's okay. We'll get coached, mentored, and trained, and we'll do better. But to think that we're perfect, we're human, we're mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters, we have a very tough job, and we need the public support. We need Congress's support. And I see the numbers coming back. And whether it's law enforcement or public service, we want men and women to come back to those ranks. And I think we see the increase, and I feel optimistic about the future on the road we're going with the initiatives that Congress is putting in place, and our president as well as Governor Landry, that people are coming back to Louisiana. And I think I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think men and women are starting to come back. You're seeing our engagement in the community. You're seeing how hard we're working as police officers, sheriff's deputies, and troopers for our young, our children that are seated behind us. So when they look up to law enforcement, look up to military veterans who serve our country, that they say, that could be me one day, as opposed to, I don't want to do that job as they get through high school and college, because they realize that the community, more importantly, government, doesn't support them. So you wouldn't want to take a job in our profession if we didn't have the safeguards that are currently in place right now.
Well, I will, first and foremost, echo what you just said, and I think I want you to know and the people of Louisiana to know, and it's easier for me to say it because I'm not from Louisiana, but in our chairman, you have a tireless advocate. When you talk about leading that charge back, it really helps having someone in Congress who led a law enforcement agency, as our chairman did. And I can speak of personal experience. I had the privilege of working for President Trump for 9 years before I got elected to Congress, and I can promise you there was no louder voice in the president's orbit and directly to the president on behalf of law enforcement than our distinguished chairman, Mr. Higgins. With that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman is too kind. In our remaining couple of minutes, Sergeant Zalapone, I'm going to ask you to, first let me ask respectfully, because we have children present, are you comfortable at some level speaking about shot number 9?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because if not, we'll back up. So let me just say as a preface that I remain confident in my investigative conclusions of J13 as it relates to shots 1 through 8, shot 9, and shot 10. But I'd like you to just, in the remaining couple of minutes here, describe to America your response. Describe shot number 9. Thomas Crooks fired 8 rounds at our president, 4 and 4, and then shot number 10 was fired by the counter sniper, by one of the counter sniper teams from Secret Service. They eliminated that threat. But after the first 8 shots and before the 10th shot, there was shot number 9. Will you describe that shot for us, Sergeant?
Yes, Congressman. So after when everything started, the commander, he asked for the QRF when there was words of the shooter was on the roof with a long gun. The commander, Sergeant Lenz, requested QRF to be deployed. So our
Quick response force, QRF?
yes, sir.
Okay, continue.
So as QRF was leaving, I stayed in the middle of that field to watch all the commotion on the ground level. It wasn't even, I don't know, 20 seconds after QRF deployed, the first 3 rounds were fired. While that was going on, I'm still watching the ground level because I can see all the other local officers on the ground scrambling. Had no idea at this point what was going on or where he was. As the 4th round was shot from Crooks, that's when I saw him on the rooftop and took sight on him. As I got a bead on him, he was firing his 8th shot, and as soon as he fired his 8th shot, I squeezed off number 9, and he slumped over his rifle to his right, and then he fell out of my view. As he started to slowly come up, I think that was sub 6 seconds from the time the first round was fired to my shot. It was like 5.85 seconds. As I was waiting for him to recover from the first shot, which is roughly about 10.5 seconds, I was about to press a second round off, and that's when Secret Service actually took him out.
Would you clarify what was Thomas Crook's profile from your position, and how far away were you? Where were you towards his front?
Yes, sir. So if you can imagine Thomas Crook's line of sight on the presidential candidate, now the President Trump, I was roughly, from my field of view, it was roughly his, like, 11:30. But, and I was approximately 115 yards away in the middle of the field, just standing.
You have a supported position, and you were standing,
Standing, sir, yes, not supported.
and you had a standard M4?
Yes, sir.
Did you have optics on that M4?
Just a red dot, sir.
Just a red dot, with no magnification?
No, sir.
So you took a standing shot unsupported from 114 yards away with standard red dot optics. Those EOTech optics?
Yes, sir.
EOTech standard SWAT operator optics. Took a shot under incredible pressure and made a hit, Colonel. Made a hit. He stopped Thomas Crooks. Thomas Crooks went down, and it about 10 seconds later, he described his profile compared to shot number 9 to where you were waiting on to put a second round on him. And that's when the counter sniper team ended the threat with shot number 10. They were in an elevated position with a high-powered rifle with the best optics available in the world, supported with 2 shooter teams, Colonel. So, you know, standard counter sniper stuff. But this man was unsupported, by himself, standard M4, standard red dot optics from 114 yards away from the ground, shooting to a man on a rooftop. And what happened with his profile after shot number 9?
So shot number 9, I had roughly the upper part of his shoulders and then his head. I could see the outline of a rifle. I guess for my shot placement, I went for the mouth level, just because I didn't want to overshoot. And if I would shot low, then I would use the rooftop to hopefully ricochet it up into him. After he went down and recovered, he was slowly coming back up, and he got back up to about the mouth level, from my standpoint, whenever shot 10 was fired.
So when you initially got eyes on him to the time you put shot number 9, you had a partial shoulders and a head profile just over the ridge of the roof. So not much of a profile. But when he went down, was coming back up, you had less profile. So seemed like he had backed up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's when shot number 10 was fired.
Correct.
All right. Colonel, Sergeant, God bless you and all of our brothers and sisters of the Thin Blue Line. I know you had to go out of your way to be here today. I am grateful to my Republican colleagues who took time from we have a very, very busy schedule this week, but all of us are dedicated to law enforcement, and we honor and respect the job that you do. You can consider us friends and faithful allies in your mission and in service to the citizenry of our beautiful country. To these generations sitting behind you and those yet unborn, the Thin Blue Line will stand strong forever and ever. I thank you all for being here. I thank staff for arranging this roundtable, and it is now officially adjourned.